Hey, good morning, Shelter. It is 6 a.m., so you know what that means. It's our daily 6 at 6. Now, I'm joined with my good friend here, Elijah. We are starting a brand new series, which Justin talked about yesterday, which is nutrition. Now, we're going to talk about a lot of different things that we need to do within our own spirituality to feel alive, to be alive, to have a living spiritual life. But with everything, some things we're just not as equipped to do. So we bring on what I like to call as experts in the field. And no more is this guy an expert in it because this is what he does for a living, but also he has the most humble heart about it. If you've never spent time with Elijah, you'll find out very quickly how much passion he has towards worship, but more importantly, how his heart is dedicated towards it. So I actually wanted this guy to kind of introduce his thoughts on it and why it is such a vital portion to our living nature to actually engage healthy worship. So I'm going to leave it up to you, man.
Well, thank you. For those of you who don't know, I have two companies. One does live music around town. The other one helps about 165 different churches in 3 different states by sending musicians, sound engineers, and worship leaders to them whenever they need help. So aside from it just being a big passion of mine, it's also a big part of what my company does. So Justin and Chris asked me to dive into how does worship affect our soul? Have you ever heard the phrase, you become what you worship? I don't think that's really a Christian phrase as much as it is one in the world. And I think that it helps illustrate a point that worship is like a very holistic thing. You don't usually just sing, although that's like a big part of how we express the definition of worship. It's a lot about what you do and where your mind happens to be. Isaiah 58, it's actually one of my favorite chapters of the Bible, and its title is True Worship. And about 85% of that chapter literally talks about how in that specific time he was saying to his people, like, hey, you in theory really align with me. Like, you love singing the songs, you love fasting, you love all these things, but on the same day that you like agree with me in theory, you sing to me, I find that you like go and tear down your neighbor and scream at the person next to you and your family, and essentially all these things that you are singing and all excited about, you don't actually truly align with me on. And so it reminds me of this. The way that I would define like my prayer and worship and how it feeds my soul is this. Worship is reflection and practice. If you think of essentially reflection with no practice, it's similar to back when I used to live with this guy. The good old days. I found myself a lot of times telling Chris about a girl that I just met that I fell in love with. And Chris would ask me these questions like, what's her name? Or how do you know her? And I'd be like, I don't know her name. She works at the bank. And all of a sudden, we have this essentially deep reflection of what life would be like with this person. And they're so beautiful and they're so nice to me. If only I could have a life with them. But the reality is, it's founded on nothing. And so with worship, a lot of times we cannot really align with what we're singing and the theory of it all. But if we don't have actual practice, actions put into what aligns with the Lord, it's the same thing as fantasizing about a life with a person that you know nothing about. And now let's talk about practice with no reflection. Practice with no reflection is almost the same as Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi told this kid, hey, I want you to do all these things, right? So he's like waxing on and waxing off, and he's doing all these chores, and finally it hits him. He's like, why? This guy's just using me for free work. And there's essentially no gratitude behind it. There's some resentment. There's all these actions without like much reflection on the purpose of it. And then all of a sudden we know, like, Mr. Miyagi's like, hey, guess what? He goes to hit him and he waxes off, right? And all of a sudden all these things that he practiced and the purpose became aligned with him, right? Practice without reflection is essentially the same thing. It's us doing all these motions without truly thinking about the God who like wants to do the same for us, who loves us. It's not just a God that is saying, follow me, and I'm not gonna lift a finger for you after. He literally, there's this purpose that ignites in us when we both practice and reflect on him.
It's really good, man.
Yeah.
And this is why I brought him instead of me, because, you know, when we're talking about is it living, it's like, I love that what you said is practice and what?
And reflection.
And reflection. And when, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, life can get very overwhelming at times. And if we're not able to calm back and reflect, you know, kind of that stepping back and kind of taking a breath, we'll talk about respiration later, but all these components make it for worship being one of those key ingredients to really having an alive spirit towards God. So Eli, I just want to thank you, man, for joining us. And as always, guys, we love you, and we will see you tomorrow.